When I told my husband I was pregnant, I never imagined those words would break us. His reaction? "You've ruined everything." He said he didn't want the baby. And that same night, he packed a suitcase and left, to be with a younger colleague. Even worse, his parents supported him. I was left completely alone. But years later, he came crawling back. Chad and I had been married for 4 years, together for 7. We'd talked about having kids someday, but it always felt far off. I was on birth control, but a few months ago, I got hit with a bad stomach bug. Between that and antibiotics, something must have slipped through. When I first missed my period, I assumed it was stress. My cycle's never been predictable, especially during hectic weeks at work. But then the nausea kicked in. My chest was sore. I grabbed a test during my lunch break, and those 2 pink lines lit up like neon. I took 3 more just to be sure. All positive. I was shocked. Nervous, yes. But deep down, a part of me felt joy. It wasn't planned, but I started imagining our little family. I figured Chad would need time, but I believed he'd adjust. I waited a week to tell him, planning a quiet, thoughtful moment. No fancy setup, just his favorite dinner, garlic bread, and a bottle of his go-to bourbon. I even wore that blue dress he always says makes me glow. He came home late that evening, distracted and glued to his phone. I tried to create a warm vibe, but he barely noticed. At dinner, he was distant, giving me half answers to everything. I brushed it off as work stress. After we ate, I reached across the table, took a deep breath, and said, "Chad, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was heavier than I ever imagined. His expression shifted fast. Blank, then pale, then something unfamiliar. Panic, maybe even resentment. He asked if I was joking. I said no. I told him I'd taken 4 tests. Then he said the words I'll never forget. "You ruined everything. I didn't want this." I was stunned. I tried to explain what happened, that it likely had to do with the antibiotics, but he cut me off, said maybe he never wanted kids at all, that all those conversations about someday were just to keep me happy. And then came the final blow. There was someone else. Vanessa, a coworker. Young, ambitious, constantly mentioned in glowing terms lately. Turns out she was more than just a rising star on his team. Before I could even absorb that betrayal, Chad began packing. Not just a small bag, an entire suitcase. I watched in disbelief as my husband prepared to walk out on me. The same night I told him he was going to be a father. I asked if he was really doing this, leaving his pregnant wife. He said, "I'm not ready to be a dad." I reminded him that no one feels ready, that we could figure it out, like we always had, but he'd already checked out. "I'll call in a few days," he mumbled at the door. And just like that, he was gone. I sat in that quiet apartment, heart pounding, unable to process how fast everything had crumbled. One minute, I was dreaming about our future as a family. The next, I was abandoned, with a baby on the way. I called my best friend, Julie, sobbing so hard she could barely understand me. She rushed over, held me on the couch, and just let me cry. That night, I started questioning everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I kept asking myself, how could I have been so wrong about him? That night, I cried until I passed out on the couch. When I opened my eyes the next morning, Julie was still there, curled up in the armchair, having stayed the night to make sure I wasn't alone. For a brief second, I hoped it had all been some awful dream, until the nausea hit. That was my reality now. My husband was gone, but the pregnancy? Still very real. Julie made me toast and tea, insisting I eat something. Not for me, but for the baby. I sat there in silence, hand resting on my stomach, reminding myself, whatever Chad chooses to do, this is still my child, my responsibility, my future. I tried calling Chad throughout the day. Every call went straight to voicemail. I sent a short text asking him not to shut me out. No reply. By late afternoon, my shock had begun to fade, giving way to something much stronger, anger. So I called my OBGYN and scheduled my first prenatal appointment. If I had to do this alone, then so be it. That evening, I got a call from Chad's mom, Rebecca. Her voice was calm, but the conversation wasn't. She told me Chad had spoken to them, that he just needed time. Because apparently, at 31, he was still too young for a family. I reminded her of his age. She deflected, said he was focused on his career right now. Then came the part that made my blood run cold. She suggested very carefully that I consider other options. She didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. I told her, as firmly as I could, that I was keeping this baby, her grandchild, period. That call ended with me trembling, not from fear, but from clarity. I finally understood where Chad's sense of entitlement came from. The days after that passed in a fog. I went to work, tried to fake normal, all while feeling like my life had been turned upside down. I spoke to a lawyer, researched single parenthood, budgeting, childcare. I had to know what my future might look like, alone, if it came to that. 3 days after he walked out, Chad finally texted. Not to check on me, not to ask how I was, just to say he was staying with Vanessa and that he'd cover some bills. That was it. When I asked if we could talk in person, his reply was short. I need space. 2 weeks later, while I was at work, he came to our apartment to grab more of his stuff. I came home to find his keys on the kitchen counter and a note. He'd paid rent through next month, and he'd be in touch once he spoke to a lawyer. He actually wrote the word divorce. That was it. No conversation, no closure, just a note. I went to my first prenatal appointment, alone. When they did the ultrasound and I heard that steady, whooshing little heartbeat, I couldn't hold it in. I started crying. The tech probably thought it was joy, but it was so much more than that. It was grief, it was fear, it was love. That tiny heartbeat was the sound of someone depending on me. I tucked the printout of the scan into my bag and later pinned it to the fridge. It was just a little blur, bean-shaped and small, but already the center of my world. 3 weeks after Chad left, his father called. Unlike Rebecca, Roland at least asked how I was holding up. I told him the truth, that I felt abandoned, betrayed, and hurt. He tried to defend his wife, saying she didn't mean any harm, that they were simply worried about Chad's future. He called the pregnancy bad timing, said Chad just wasn't in the right place to be a father. I reminded him that I hadn't planned on doing this alone either. But that's what being an adult is, facing what life throws at you. He offered financial help but made it clear that Chad needed to prioritize his path and that Vanessa had been good for him. After I hung up, something shifted inside me. I realized I was completely alone in this. Chad had picked Vanessa. His parents had picked Chad. It was just me and this baby now. And somehow, that truth was freeing. No more waiting. No more hoping. I could start making real decisions. For us. That night, I called Julie and told her I needed to move. The apartment held too many memories. She offered her spare room without hesitation. As I packed a few things and looked around the place we once called home, I felt something unexpected. Hope. Not for him. That chapter was closed. But for me. For my child. For what's next. I wasn't pretending it would be easy. Nothing about this would be. But one thing I knew for sure. My baby would never feel like a mistake. Never feel unwanted. Not by me. Tomorrow I meet my lawyer again to begin divorce proceedings. Chad thinks he can just walk away like it never happened. But he doesn't know who he left behind. I may be bruised, but I'm still standing. And I'm just getting started. Calling it an understatement doesn't even scratch the surface. I have a son now. A real, tiny human who depends on me for everything. His name is Tiago. He's 8 months old. And despite all the heartbreak that led here, he is hands down the best thing that's ever happened to me. Yesterday, something hit me while I was folding his impossibly small socks. One of those moments that just stops you in your tracks. Chad has never met him. Not at his birth. Not for his first smile. Not for his first holidays. Nothing. My child's father lives less than half an hour away and is a complete stranger to his own son. I guess I should pick up from where I left off. The divorce was finalized when I was 7 months pregnant. Chad didn't fight it. Not a single objection, which, according to my lawyer, was rare, but made things move quickly. The court ordered a reasonable amount of child support based on his income, which, at the very least, gave me a small sense of structure. But even that's been inconsistent. More on that later. I moved out of our old apartment and found a small 2-bedroom closer to Julie. The rent stretches my budget more than I'd like, but it's in a good school district. Funny how fast you start thinking about that once you become a parent. My dining room is now overrun with a bouncer, a pack and play, and what looks like the contents of a toy aisle spilled across the floor. Marie Kondo would probably faint. Tiago arrived on a Tuesday night after 19 exhausting hours of labor. Julie was there the whole time, holding my hand and feeding me ice chips while I screamed that I couldn't do it. The nurses kept asking about the father. Eventually, I stopped explaining. He's not in the picture, I'd say. And even though that felt true, it still hurt every time I said it. Those early weeks were an emotional hurricane. No sleep, physical pain, constant doubt. I remember one night sitting on the bathroom floor at 3 a.m., sobbing, holding my screaming baby and Googling why won't newborns sleep. I felt so lost, but somehow we made it through, one day at a time. Tiago and I figured each other out. I learned to recognize his cries. Hungry sounds different than tired, which is different than just hold me. I learned he loves when I sing, even though my voice is pretty awful. And I watched his little personality begin to bloom. He's observant, a little stubborn. Wonder where he gets that. And he laughs with his whole face. That laugh alone can turn a hard day around. Returning to work was rough. I went back when Tiago was just 10 weeks old because I needed the income. Luckily, my boss, Anastasia, was more supportive than I expected, letting me work from home a couple days a week. Finding childcare was a nightmare. The cost was more than my rent. It felt like I was being punished for trying to survive. I eventually found a decent daycare, but it still eats up a huge chunk of my paycheck. And then there's Chad's financial support. Sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't. There's always an excuse: car issues, new job, random emergencies. Last month it was late because he and Vanessa were vacationing in Spain. Yes, Spain. I saw the photos on Instagram before he even replied to my messages about the missing payment. And yes, I made the mistake of checking his social media. A few months after Tiago was born, I peaked. Rooftop bars, matching outfits. Not a sign of a sleepless night or a stained onesie in sight. I blocked them both after that. Julie was right. It was wrecking my peace of mind. Julie, by the way, has been my rock. She shows up with takeout when I'm too tired to even think about cooking. She'll cuddle Tiago so I can take a real shower. She even threw me a baby shower at 8 months pregnant when everyone else, especially Chad's circle, completely disappeared. It's wild how fast people pick sides when things get uncomfortable. Chad's parents? That's another story. After fully backing their son's exit from my life, something shifted after Tiago was born. About a month in, I got a message from Rebecca asking to meet their grandson. I didn't reply right away. I wasn't sure what to feel. Then came flowers, baby gifts, a handwritten letter expressing how much they wanted to be part of his life. Eventually, I agreed to a short visit. Tiago was 4 months old. The visit was, awkward. Rebecca kept saying how much he looked like Chad as a baby. Roland took about 50 photos. They came with pricey gifts and mentioned starting a college fund. But not once did they bring up their son's absence. Not one apology for the way they treated me. And when they casually asked if they could take Tiago for an overnight soon, I had to shut that down immediately. There was no way I was letting them take my baby overnight, not after they once implied I should end this pregnancy. Trust doesn't magically appear with toys and flowers. That conversation didn't end well. Rebecca accused me of using Tiago to punish Chad, which honestly was laughable. Chad hasn't shown a single shred of interest in our son. Not one message asking how he is, what he looks like, if he's taken his first steps. Nothing. And that's the part I still can't wrap my head around. How do you know you have a child out there and just not care? No curiosity, no photos, no calls. Just silence. Tiago has his father's eyes and his same dimpled chin. But to Chad, it's like he's not a real person. Just an inconvenient idea he's chosen to ignore. I've tried to be the better person. When Tiago was born, I sent Chad a short text. His birth stats and a photo. No reply. I even created a shared photo album online and occasionally upload pictures. As far as I know, it's never been opened. For Tiago's first Christmas, I sent a holiday card with his picture. It came back a week later, unopened, returned to sender. Meanwhile, life keeps moving. Tiago started daycare. He caught every possible bug during the first month. No one tells you that's part of the deal. But now, he's basically got the immune system of a superhero. He's crawling everywhere, pulling himself up, chewing on everything. My apartment looks like it's been baby-proofed by a SWAT team. I haven't seen my coffee table without corner guards in so long. I forget what it even looks like. My daily routine is a marathon in slow motion. Up at 5:30 a.m. to shower before he wakes. Get him dressed, fed, out the door by 7:15. Daycare drop-off by 8. Work until 5. Pick up by 5:30. Paying the late fee if traffic or meetings hold me up. Home by 6. Dinner, bath, stories, bedtime. Then laundry, dishes, bills, maybe half an episode of something on Netflix before I pass out on the couch. And then, do it all again. The hardest moments are the quiet ones no one talks about. When Tiago had his first fever at 3 a.m. and I had to decide alone whether to go to urgent care. When he says mama, but there's no one he calls dad. When daycare forms ask for the father's info and I write NA while other parents fill in both sections. But there are beautiful moments too. The way he wakes up smiling, babbling nonsense, arms reaching for me, his joy in splashing during bath time, his fascination with the ceiling fan, the weight of his tiny body sleeping on my chest, breath warm on my neck. Those are the moments that carry me. I won't sugarcoat it. Being a single mom is the hardest thing I've ever done. There are days I put the milk in the cabinet and the cereal in the fridge. Days I cry in the shower because it's the only place Tiago can't hear me. Days I snap at people for no reason just because I'm running on fumes. But we're doing it, and I'm proud of that. Really proud. Tiago's first birthday is coming up next month. Julie's helping me plan a small party. Just a few close friends, cake, and probably way too many decorations because Julie can't resist Pinterest. I thought about inviting Chad's parents. And then I remembered that last conversation, the one where I was accused of turning their grandson into a weapon. No thank you. They still text sometimes asking to see him, but always on their terms. No acknowledgement of the son they raised, walking away from his own child. And Chad? I'm not expecting a birthday card. Last I heard, he and Vanessa moved in together. Got a dog. I guess that's the level of commitment he's comfortable with. But the moment that really crystallized everything came last week. I signed the lease for a new apartment. Nothing fancy, but it has a little yard and it's in a better school district. While I was signing the papers, my phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. They were having a family reunion and wanted to include their grandson. She even attached a photo, Chad and Vanessa, arms around each other, smiling like life's perfect. No mention of the child they've never met. Just a polished snapshot of a man who lives as if his son doesn't exist. I stared at that photo for a long time. Not with rage, not even sadness, but clarity. I've spent a year hoping Chad might step up, sending photos into a void, making space for someone who never intended to show up. I've been fair, I've been patient, and I'm done. I texted back, Tiago won't be attending. If Chad wants to meet his son, he knows how to reach me. But I won't keep pretending he's anything more than absent. By choice. Then I blocked the number. Maybe that sounds harsh, but I'm no longer protecting Chad's image. I'm done carrying the emotional burden while he lives his life untouched by consequence. Tiago deserves better. I deserve better. And I won't let us settle for less. This is our story now, and I'm writing the next chapter on my terms. Chad suddenly taking an interest now? It wouldn't change a thing. The truth is, we're better off without someone who could walk away so easily. Tiago deserves people who choose him, who show up, who love him without conditions or hesitation. And I've accepted that I can't force Chad to be that person. So here we are, 1 year later. Just me and my son, figuring it all out together. It's not the life I imagined. Not even close. But tonight, as I watch Tiago sleep, his little chest rising and falling, his hand wrapped around his favorite stuffed giraffe, I realize something. Sometimes the family you build isn't the one you expected, but it's still absolutely perfect in its own way. I don't know what the future holds. Our divorce settlement included a clause about revisiting custody if Chad ever decides to step up, but that felt like a formality, not a real possibility. Part of me hopes he stays gone. Another small, stunned part still doesn't understand how he could want nothing to do with a son like Tiago. But right now, I'm focused on what I can control, building a safe home, making memories, being both mom and dad the best I can. And maybe someday, learning to trust again. That's a problem for future me. Tonight, I still have laundry to fold and maybe 4 hours of sleep ahead of me. Tiago will be up by 6, whether I'm ready or not. So that's where we are. 1 year, one perfect little boy, and 1 day at a time. Second update. I honestly didn't think I'd be writing again, but here we are, 4 years later. And something happened yesterday that I can't stop thinking about. Tiago just turned 5. 5. The baby who once fit on my chest is now this wildly curious, chatty kindergartner who corrects my pronunciation of dinosaur names and can recite the planets in order like it's nothing. Time is strange. Yesterday was his very first day of kindergarten. I took the morning off to walk him in, expecting the usual chaos of backpacks and goodbyes. What I didn't expect was to see Chad's old friend Leroy in the parking lot, dropping off his own daughter. I froze for a moment. Tiago tugged my hand, excited to see his new classroom, so I pushed through. After getting him settled and crying a little, but just me, not him, I headed back to my car. That's when Leroy approached. To my surprise, it wasn't awkward. He just asked how I was doing. We ended up grabbing coffee across from the school. That's when he told me. Chad and Vanessa broke up 6 months ago. Apparently, she wanted kids. Chad said he still wasn't ready. At 35. After stringing her along for years, she gave him an ultimatum. He didn't pick her. Leroy said Chad's company downsized last year and he's been couch surfing ever since. Meanwhile, Vanessa kept the apartment and moved on. That life Chad abandoned us for? It fell apart. I sat there stirring my coffee, feeling nothing. No satisfaction. No, he got what he deserved. Just this strange, hollow distance. Like hearing about a character from a show I stopped watching a long time ago. What hit me most was the contrast. My life now? It's completely different than when Chad left. After years of balancing motherhood and work, I've finally found stability. I've been at the same company for 6 years, and last year Anastasia promoted me to senior project manager. That promotion changed everything. I was finally able to buy a small townhouse. Nothing extravagant, but it's ours. There's a tiny backyard where Tiago and I try to grow tomatoes. They never turn out right, but it's our thing. His handprints are painted on his bedroom wall. Financial stability wasn't easy. There were years of tight budgets, late nights with spreadsheets, calculating every dollar. Chad stopped paying child support shortly after Tiago turned 3. I went through official channels, but he changed jobs so often it felt like chasing smoke. Eventually, I let it go. The emotional cost wasn't worth it. I'd rather Tiago see a calm, present mother than one consumed by court letters and stress. The question I've been dreading started showing up last year. Why don't I have a daddy? He asked it in the middle of a grocery run, completely out of the blue. I thought I'd be ready for that moment. I had read articles, planned gentle answers, but nothing prepares you for the look in your child's eyes when they just want to understand. I told him the truth, in the simplest way I could, that his dad wasn't ready to be a parent, but that it had nothing to do with Tiago, that he is deeply loved and always wanted, that sometimes grown-ups make choices they can't take back, but he would always have me. And he does. We've built our own version of family. Julie's still around, his favorite aunt, bringing movie nights and card tricks. My parents visit every month, soaking up every moment with their grandson. We've created our own village, a strong one that doesn't need Chad. And then, about 10 months ago, something unexpected happened. It was parent-teacher night at Tiago's preschool. I kept noticing this dad across the room. Kind eyes, terrible joke t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." His daughter, Emma, was in Tiago's class. And little did I know, he was about to change everything. It's strange how a person can vanish for years and suddenly decide they're ready to be part of the story again. But here's the truth. Tiago and I are better off without anyone who can walk away that easily. My son deserves people who choose him, fully, consistently, and without conditions. I can't make Chad become that person, and I've stopped trying. So here we are, 5 years later. A single mom and her little boy thriving. It's not the life I planned, but in many ways, it's the life we were meant to have. Watching Tiago sleep the other night, I realized something that stopped me cold. The family I built is nothing like the one I envisioned, and yet, it's perfect in its own way. The divorce settlement included a clause about revisiting custody if Chad ever decided he wanted to be involved. At the time, it felt laughable, but my lawyer said it was standard. And a small part of me, one I hate to admit, still can't understand how someone could know they have a child and not want to know that child, not want to see who they're becoming. But I've focused on what I can control. Building a stable home, making memories that last, being both mom and dad, and maybe, someday, finding the courage to trust someone again. That someday came sooner than I expected. It started at parent-teacher night, 10 months ago. I kept noticing a dad across the room with kind eyes and a ridiculous t-shirt that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." His name was Douglas. His daughter Emma was in Tiago's class. He was calm and warm, gently helping her through a meltdown about leaving the classroom toys, and something about his quiet patience caught my attention. Douglas, widowed father, makes dinosaur-shaped pepperoni pizza on Fridays, remembers Teacher Appreciation Week without being reminded, and listens to Tiago ramble about space like he's giving a TED Talk. What started as playdates turned into coffee chats, then late-night conversations after the kids fell asleep, then dinners that became something more. Douglas never rushed me. He understood that Tiago and I are a package deal. He brought books about stars, fixed Tiago's wobbly bike seat without being asked, and always asked the kind of questions that made me feel seen. 6 months into dating, he opened up about losing Emma's mom to cancer when Emma was just a baby. He told me about the fear of raising a daughter alone. The way he kept her mother's photos in every room so Emma would always know who she came from. That honesty, that love, that grief made me trust him in a way I hadn't trusted anyone since my marriage fell apart. We've been together 7 months now. The kids call us special friends. And honestly, I think they're happy. Last month, Douglas and I sat on my back porch after bedtime and had the conversation. Where is this going? Nothing grand, just two adults talking about real things. And we both said we wanted to move forward. Together. Then came a familiar knock. Chad's parents, suddenly interested again. After years of silence, they began texting, sending birthday gift cards, and last month Rebecca called, asking if they could take Tiago for a weekend. I said no, and when I explained why, she got defensive, claimed they'd always wanted a relationship, and that I had been keeping Tiago from them. Funny how that interest returned once Chad moved back into their house. Last week, Douglas asked if he could take Tiago and Emma fishing. Something simple, but it brought tears to my eyes. Tiago was so excited. He said he wanted to fish like real boys do. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me, and I checked Chad's social media. The curated life of travel and rooftop selfies was gone. In its place, vague quotes about new beginnings and finding yourself. Not a single mention of the son he abandoned just a few miles away. I closed the app and felt something surprising. Peace. 5 years ago, I was shattered. Today, I'm stronger than I've ever been. I have a job I'm proud of, a home I own, a son who amazes me, and a partner who chooses us, not out of obligation, but out of love. And Chad? His choices led him exactly where they were always going to. That life is behind me now. A different timeline I've long since stepped out of. Third update. Last Saturday started like any other. Pancakes, a scramble to get to Tiago's soccer game. Douglas and I huddled under an umbrella on the sidelines. Then he nudged me and asked, "Is that someone you know?" Across the field, Chad. After years of nothing, he was just there, watching Tiago play. No warning, no message, just a stranger on the sidelines. At halftime, Tiago came running over, beaming. That's when Chad walked up. Tiago looked at him and asked, "Who's that man?" My heart sank. Chad mumbled something about how big Tiago had gotten. I sent Tiago back to the team and turned to confront him. He admitted Rebecca had told him about the game. It all made sense now, the sudden surge of interest from his parents. Chad and Douglas shook hands. I saw Chad flinch slightly when Douglas said, "I'm Tiago's father," I clarified. Biological only. We spoke briefly at a nearby coffee shop while Douglas took the kids for ice cream. Chad had been in therapy, 8 months sober, living with his parents after the breakup with Vanessa. The most stunning part? He admitted he told his parents to keep their distance from Tiago because he couldn't face what he'd walked away from. Now he wants to fix it, to know his son. I told him the truth. Tiago isn't the baby he abandoned. He's a real person now, with feelings, memories, and a life Chad knows nothing about. Chad asked about Douglas. When I told him the truth, that Douglas has been more of a father than he ever was, his face twisted, just slightly. I agreed to one supervised meeting, short, with me present, and if he disappeared again, that was it. Forever. We talked with our family therapist. Douglas supported the decision. I told Tiago the news. His questions were harder than I imagined. Why now? Will Douglas come too? Will he like me? He wore his soccer jersey to the meeting. So he knows I'm good at soccer, he said. The meeting wasn't awful. Chad brought a Lego soccer set, and they built it together. For the first time in years, I noticed echoes, similar expressions, the same way their eyebrows furrow in concentration. We did a few more short visits over 2 weeks. Then Chad asked to take Tiago to a movie alone. 3 weeks of effort doesn't erase 7 years of absence. I said no. A few days later, Chad showed up at our house, uninvited, with his parents. They talked about moving forward as a family. I reminded them, this is not how you rebuild trust. Then Chad asked to speak to me privately. That's when he said it. I still love you, Melissa. I never stopped. I couldn't believe the audacity. He suggested that we get back together, for Tiago's sake. That we could give him the family he deserves. When Douglas came downstairs, I told him everything. He was quiet, understandably shaken. But I reassured him, I'm exactly where I want to be. Later that night, Chad texted again saying he meant every word about wanting another chance. I stared at the message for a long time. Not angry, just done. Tomorrow I'll call him. I'll explain clearly. He is welcome to earn a place in his son's life, as a biological father only. As for me, that door is closed. Some bridges once burned stay ashes.